This 12-year-old girl is about to be forced to marry a stranger as a political marriage tool. As a result, she develops a high fever. In her delirium, she awakens memories from her past life. Her name is Lillian, a young sister to the current lord of the estate of Turin. She's also the villainous mother of the male protagonist from a novel she read in her previous life. In the novel, she was foolish and greedy. Manipulated by her nanny, she came to see her brother, who loved her dearly, as an enemy. After marriage, she could never win her husband's heart. Nanny told her that bearing a son would earn her his love. However, all her fantasies shattered on the day the child was born. Not only did her beloved husband not come, but she also permanently lost her ability to bear children. She blamed all her tragedies on this newborn child. In public, she was a vain and hypocritical noble lady. In private, she was a cruel and selfish mother. After her abuse of the child was exposed, she was abandoned by her husband due to her greed and selfishness. She committed suicide in front of the young male protagonist, ending her absurd life. Her existence was merely a backdrop to highlight the male protagonist's tragic childhood, and this experience became an inescapable nightmare for the male protagonist, until he met the beautiful and kind female protagonist who healed him. Her husband also turned into a monster and was eventually killed by their son. Having recalled the plot, Lillian trembles uncontrollably. She doesn't want to die so miserably as in the novel. The root of all evil comes from the nanny's manipulation, and now, Nanny is kneeling by her bedside, trying to drive a wedge between her and her brother. In the novel, it was precisely these sweet words that Nanny used to gain her trust, but now Lillian won't be deceived by her again. She fumbles for a valuable necklace from her bed and hands it to Nanny under her greedy gaze. She shows an innocent yet polite smile while speaking cruel words. "You're dismissed. This necklace is your compensation." Nanny doesn't react immediately, but Lillian has already begun to enumerate her crimes. She tells Nanny that if she continues to pester her, she'll accuse her of stealing the necklace. The nanny is shocked that this little girl is no longer under her control. She can only leave temporarily, but she won't give up easily. After she leaves, Lillian finally breathes a sigh of relief, but she has only just successfully dealt with the first factor causing her misfortune. What comes next won't be so simple. Then she needs to win over her stepbrother Cedric, who was constantly abused by Lillian's birth mother in his childhood. Now that both their parents are dead, after Cedric inherited the lordship, he treats his willful and spoiled sister with cold indifference. Just a week ago, Lillian fainted from crying because she didn't want to accept the marriage he arranged. But to prevent the tragedy from the novel from happening again, she decides to take the initiative and visit her stepbrother. As soon as she enters, she sees Cedric reviewing official documents, looking exhausted. She obediently tells him she has something to discuss with him, which makes the busy Cedric frown involuntarily. But what he doesn't expect is that the usually willful and spoiled Lillian has actually come to apologize. She shows a brilliant smile, expressing her willingness to accept the marriage arrangement. Her abnormal behavior makes his glasses slip in shock. He hurriedly gets up to confirm with her again. Lillian responds with an apologetic smile, telling Cedric that she reflected on herself after returning that day. Everything she currently possesses comes with the premise of protecting the family and the people. Since she enjoys privileges, she must fulfill corresponding responsibilities. Cedric is shocked by her sudden maturity, even seeing a glimpse of their father in her for a moment. Lillian feels anxious because she doesn't know if today her performance will improve his impression of her. But from the moment she entered, she could see Cedric was busy, so she decides not to disturb him further. However, Cedric calls her back, asking if she's not curious about who her fiancé is. Lillian compliantly replies that it's not her place to know. If this were before, Cedric definitely wouldn't tell her. After all, this marriage was the secret deal prompted by their parents' assassination, but the sensible sister before him evokes a sense of guilt. He tells her that her marriage partner is the current emperor's younger brother, Damien, the only Grand Duke in the Empire. Lillian didn't expect to gain his trust so quickly. Although she already knew from the novel in her past life who her fiancé was, thinking about marrying a man who went to war at 13 and was called the god of war by 17 still makes her somewhat uneasy. Out of guilt, Cedric wants to give her some material compensation, while Lillian firmly refuses. But she feels today's Cedric is very different. Looking carefully, she notices dark circles under his eyes. She hurriedly rushes over, concernedly asking if he hasn't rested for several days straight. Faced with her sudden concern, Cedric feels somewhat at a loss, as their relationship wasn't exactly harmonious before. He tells her he has slept for a while, but Lillian doesn't seem satisfied and keeps urging him to rest immediately. Cedric can only dismissively tell her not to worry about it. Lillian shows a pitiful expression, innocently blinking as she says he's her only remaining family member. Her words immediately make Cedric fall into deep thought. After their parents' death, only he and Lillian are left to depend on each other, yet he hadn't realized this before. He gently strokes her head. At this moment, he decides to properly protect his only sister. Lillian clearly feels Cedric's attitude toward her has changed, but to deepen their bond further, she gathers courage to take his hand and lead him to the sofa, saying she's changed her mind. She has something she wants. That is, she hopes him to take a rest right now. Cedric didn't expect her to come up with such a method to make him rest. He then shows a gratified smile, deciding not to disappoint her kindness. Having been overworked for so long, he soon falls into deep sleep. Lillian also quietly closes the door and leaves. After waking up, Cedric instructs the head butler Alan to increase Lillian's living allowance by 5 times. Alan is immediately frozen in place. Lillian, who has just returned to her room, didn't expect to receive a gift from her brother so soon. The dazzling array of gifts gifts almost fills the room completely, each one precious and magnificent. Seeing that her brother has bought almost everything young noble ladies like, Lillian is first moved, but then realizes she had never received gifts from him before, which makes her suspect these are compensation for her marriage. However, she's still glad to receive the gifts. Her favorite is the plush bear that's about as tall as she is, because its soft texture like delicious cotton candy. Among the many gifts, Lillian discovers another treasure, which she decides to share with her brother. She quietly pushes open the door. Seeing it's her, Cedric asks if she has something else to discuss. Lillian quickly shakes her head, saying she has nothing particular, which makes his pen pause as he deals with busy official duties. Being interrupted makes him somewhat displeased. If it were the former Lillian, she would surely be scared by his gloomy expression, but now she understands his difficulties. She knows that facing sudden title and responsibilities, he needs time to process everything. Her purpose for coming this time is to make him rest a bit more. She found an exquisite tea set among the gifts he sent her. She can use tea ceremony performance to stall for time, so he won't have to keep reviewing documents. Lillian elegantly shows him the fluffy slippers he gave her that she likes very much. Then she mentions she's been learning tea culture recently. To show her gratitude, she wants to make tea for him. However, the attentive Cedric notices her hand is injured. Lillian smiles and says she accidentally burned herself while learning to make tea, but it doesn't hurt at all. Cedric feels very distressed seeing her so considerate. She then begins brewing tea with skillful technique, each step done elegantly and properly. Soon she finishes brewing. She pushes the first cup she brewed toward Cedric. Cedric is also curious about what her tea will taste like. However, upon tasting, it's exceptionally bitter, making even Lillian herself frown. But Cedric understands her intentions. Since their parents' death, he hasn't felt this relaxed in a long time. Feeling he has rested enough, Lillian obediently prepares to leave. Before leaving, she doesn't forget to ask for the privilege of coming to make tea every day. Unknowingly, this small figure has already entered his heart. Now Cedric is beginning to feel reluctant about her getting married. The next day, Lillian is heading to Cedric's office. While she encounters Alan halfway, Lillian conceals her inner panic. Because he and her brother both suffered abuse from her mother before, so she doesn't know if he dislikes her. Alan also didn't expect to run into her so early in the morning. He then notices the tea set in her hands and understands she's going to serve tea to Cedric. He's heard that after her recovery from serious illness, she became mature and composed like a completely different person, which makes him eye her with quiet assessment. He respectfully bows to Lillian and expresses his apology for that. As the head butler, his poor management allowed her to do work that servants should do. Lillian instinctively glances at the nervous maid beside her and quickly explains that she insisted on carrying the tea set herself. But she knows that for the Turin family retainers who value loyalty, her doing everything personally would be interpreted as distrust of them. She guesses that Alan is testing her, so she unhesitatingly hands over the tray. Alan shows approval for her admission of her mistake without apologizing. When they reach the office, Cedric is still reviewing documents. He originally thought her promise to make tea for him that day was just a momentary whim. While she's brewing tea, he asks why she dismissed the nanny who had always taken care of her. Lillian didn't expect his information network to be so well informed. She nods and tells him Nanny was overstepping her bounds. With a clang, Cedric sets down his teacup heavily, which startles Lillian. But she soon realizes Cedric is actually worried that her poor handling might leave future troubles. She quickly explains that she gave her nanny generous compensation, even if she might face the revenge from Nanny someday. She knows her brother, as Lord of the Estate of Turin, will protect her. With him as her solid backing, she's not worried about anything, seeing the once timid and cowardly child become brave and strong because of him. It further strengthens his determination to protect her. As long as I'm here, you never have to be afraid. After Cedric's evolution into a sister complex, the most direct impact on Lillian is a significant improvement in her quality of life. Even the maid attending to her daily needs is replaced by Madame Hayworth, the most senior head maid in the estate. Her modesty and consideration immediately win Madame Hayworth's affection. Just then, a knock sounds at the door. It's the doctor who came to examine Lillian's health. Facing the doctor who came to treat her, she cooperates obediently, which makes the doctor view her with new respect. But no matter how good her attitude, she can't escape taking medicine. Lillian looks at the large bottle of medicine in her hands with difficulty, but she still obediently tilts her head back and drinks it all in one gulp. The bitter taste makes her small face scrunch up. Madame Hayworth beside her scolds the doctor for not warning that the medicine was bitter. The doctor also didn't expect Lillian's reaction to be so strong, but he finds her childish little expression quite cute. On another side, Cedric asks Alan for his opinion of Lillian. Although they're close friends, Alan's closeness with Lillian makes him feel like his territory is being invaded. Alan didn't expect him to become so jealous. He tells Cedric that the now sensible young lady makes him completely unable to dislike her. He had misunderstood her before with his words full of praise for Lillian, which makes Cedric's sense of crisis even stronger. He reminds Alan with a dark expression that Lillian is his biological sister. Just as a conflict seems about to erupt, the doctor's timely appearance makes them temporarily cease hostilities. He tells Cedric that Lillian has basically recovered now, but Cedric didn't call the doctor just for her physical condition. On the contrary, her sudden transformation makes him uneasy. She speaks too little, possessing maturity inappropriate for her age, desiring nothing as if she's seen through everything. Initially, he was satisfied with her sensibility, but now he's beginning to worry whether her sudden change might be due to some psychological illness. He anxiously asks for the doctor's opinion. The doctor is speechless about his excessive worry, explaining that Lillian's behavior today is indeed overly mature. But he suggests Cedric ask her directly. Sometimes opportunities come just like this. A maid's knock interrupts their conversation, and her purpose for visiting happens to be that Lillian wants to invite Cedric to afternoon tea in the garden. Under Lillian's careful arrangements, the maids systematically set up cakes and tea. After everything is prepared, Lillian even has Madame Hayworth prepare additional rewards for all the maids. Such warm actions win everyone's favor. However, Lillian is extremely anxious at this moment because she is worried that Cedric might not be able to come due to busy official duties. In that case, it will make all their efforts wasted. Madame Hayworth senses her worry. She gently tucks the loose hair by her ear and comforts her that it is an honor for everyone to serve her in the estate of Turin, advising her not to put too much psychological pressure on herself. Just then, a voice calls out to her. Lillian quickly turns around, and seeing it's her brother, she quickly rushes over and excitedly hugs him. Cedric indulgently lifts her up, his movements gentle as if holding a priceless treasure. His large palm ruffles her neatly arranged hair, and the warmth from his palm makes Lillian feel inexplicably secure. Compared to the exquisite refreshments, Cedric is more concerned about her psychological state. He worriedly asks about her thoughts on the marriage arrangement. Lillian knows he wants to confirm whether she truly willingly accepts the engagement. She knows that if she shows even half a sign of unwillingness, he would find every way to cancel the engagement. But she genuinely wants to help her brother. The royal court is currently in turmoil. Among the three brothers of the royal Puppenwein family, the eldest prince, as the late emperor died suddenly due to an unfortunate incident. Their father also sacrificed his life out of loyalty to the late emperor. The second prince took advantage of the situation to overthrow the young crown prince and usurp the throne. Therefore, marrying the third prince, who is currently the only one capable of restraining the second prince and protecting the crown prince, is their best choice at present. Moreover, Lillian knows her future husband is a devoted, handsome, and wealthy man. Although he doesn't love her, he never remarried after her death according to the novel. Even when she abused their son, he never laid a hand on her. Lillian honestly tells Cedric that this is all the result of her careful consideration. I was born for the estate of Turin. This marriage contract is my responsibility and the duty I should fulfill. For the estate of Turin and for myself, I'm willing to marry him. Seeing her determined eyes, Cedric understands she has made up her mind. But the moment he thinks about how she won't act spoiled with him anymore and will leave the estate to become someone else's bride, it's hard for him to hide his inner loss. Lillian notices his inner anxiety and warmly changes the subject, asking if he can arrange for a teacher to instruct her in royal etiquette. Cedric is greatly shocked that she's already 12 years old, yet no one has arranged teachers for her. He can't imagine what kind of life she lived before. To compensate her, he says he'll arrange teachers for her as soon as possible and asks what else she wants to learn. Lillian naturally doesn't miss this opportunity. She excitedly tells him she wants to learn etiquette, rhetoric, painting, musical instruments, and foreign languages. She enthusiastically shares her plans with him, with her eyes revealing excitement and anticipation. Cedric looks at her with undisguised indulgence. From this day on, Lillian officially begins her academic career. The pendant in her hand took her 3 days to braid, but there are still some small details that need perfecting. However, Madame Hayworth tells her to stop here for today, because her etiquette teacher will arrive soon. To make a good impression on the teacher, Lillian decides to have Madame Hayworth dress her up. She anxiously asks what kind of person the teacher is. Madame Hayworth gently asks what kind of teacher she would like. Lillian thinks any kind would be fine, guessing that it should normally be a female teacher. After dressing up, she becomes even more adorable and lovely. But what she doesn't expect is that her etiquette teacher would actually be an elderly gentleman. However, upon learning that he will only instruct her for 1 day, she breathes a slight sigh of relief. At this moment, she doesn't know that this temporary teacher is actually her future husband's grandfather. Lillian gently lifts her skirt and elegantly performs a standard greeting bow to the teacher before her. Duke Hemenlina nods with satisfaction. The girl before him is perfect in both dress and demeanor. He tells Lillian that he's always heard Cedric praise her, and seeing her today, she truly lives up to her reputation. Lillian doesn't become proud from his praise but modestly lowers her head, saying it's all excessive praise. Because I'm much younger than my brother, he's always been indulgent with me. Her response shows perfect tact, making Duke Hemenlina's favorable impression of her rise another level. He had heard before that she was also skilled in tea ceremony. He politely asks if he might have the honor of drinking a cup of tea brewed by her own hands. Lillian naturally agrees readily and immediately orders the maids to prepare the tea set. Her tea technique flows like water. Duke Hemenlina admires that this level of proficiency clearly shows she has practiced specifically. Lillian presents the brewed tea to him. The clear color of the tea makes him very satisfied. He elegantly takes a sip, but the strange taste upon entry makes him frown involuntarily. Lillian worriedly asks if it doesn't suit his taste. Duke Hemenlina suppresses the bitterness in his mouth and waves his hand, realizing that Lillian might not be aware of how terrible her tea brewing is. But looking at her kind and innocent appearance, Duke Hemenlina ultimately can't bear to tell the truth. Fortunately, there are refreshments to accompany it, making the tea not so hard to swallow. He smiles and expresses gratitude to Lillian. Lillian responds with a smile, saying it's her honor to have the opportunity to brew tea for Duke Hemenlina. Duke Hemenlina didn't expect his identity to be discovered, but now he's more curious about how she figured it out. Lillian explains that if today's visitor weren't him but someone else, her brother definitely wouldn't let her meet them. After After all, her brother now values her safety highly and wouldn't easily let her meet strangers. Moreover, Duke Ham and Lena mentioned her marriage arrangement from the moment he entered, which proves he must also be related to the marriage. So considering all the above conditions, there's only one possible candidate, the third prince's grandfather. After hearing her analysis, Duke Ham and Lena bursts into hearty laughter. He didn't expect his grandson's bride to be able to calmly analyze situations at such a young age. The attendant guarding the door curiously peers into the room. Having followed Duke Ham and Lena for many years, this is the first time he's heard him laugh so happily. Cedric expresses approval of Lillian and tells her he didn't mean to frighten her. If she wants any compensation, she can freely ask. Lillian is startled by his sudden reward, but she worries this might be a test from him. Duke Ham and Lena generously tells her to speak freely. Whether it's territory or jewelry once worn by his daughter, all are possible. Lillian smiles awkwardly. Giving her jewelry once worn by the late Empress would be too much of an honor, but if she refuses, it would be disrespectful to him. Suddenly, she has an inspiration and takes out the pendant she braided earlier from her bosom, presenting it to Duke Ham and Lena with both hands. The things you mentioned are all too precious for me to even dream of. How about you accept this unworthy trifle instead? Faced with the gift she offers, Duke Ham and Lena feels a bit awkward. It should be him, as an elder, giving her a meeting gift, but Lillian's next words successfully resolve the current awkwardness. She shows a brilliant smile and tells him this is something she braided herself. Although it's not very good, if he could accept it, she would feel extremely honored, and this honor would be the best gift he could give her. Her perfect response wins Duke Ham and Lena's recognition. He didn't expect her to be so clever. But what Lillian doesn't know is that this pendant will soon be hanging from her future husband's belt. After Duke Ham and Lena leaves, Lillian also welcomes her real etiquette teacher, Marchioness Lannister. The learning process is complex and tedious, but Lillian has excellent comprehension. Every simple movement is performed by her with dignity and elegance, which makes her instructor Marchioness Lannister full of praise. Complementing that with her current level, participating in social gatherings would be more than adequate. But Lillian still can't hide her inner nervousness. Marchioness Lannister comforts her. It's normal to be nervous, explaining that for young noble ladies, social gatherings are like battlefields without gunpowder, and some noble wives even select future daughters-in-law at these gatherings. The previous Lillian had also participated in such social gatherings, but because she didn't understand the most basic social etiquette, she was ostracized and even ridiculed by others. She worries that if she performs poorly, she'll embarrass her teacher, but Marchioness Lannister naturally isn't worried about her performance. Knowing that Lillian simply lacks confidence in herself, she tells her that as long as she does as she practices normally, there will definitely be no problems. On another front, Lillian's marriage certificate has also been successfully delivered to the third Prince Damien. Sent along with the marriage certificate is a uniquely styled belt, with the pendant Lillian previously gave to Duke Ham and Lena hanging from it. Damien has little interest in his political marriage. His little fiancée should only be 12 years old now. The estate of Turin sending the marriage certificate at this time must be to declare their position. According to imperial law, both parties can divorce at any time within 3 years of submitting the marriage certificate. To prevent allies from betraying them, some families exchange marriage certificates 3 years in advance, but such cases are rare. It seems the estate of Turin has decided to form an alliance with him. Damien picks up the marriage certificate and casually flips through it, then tosses it aside. He can't even remember his fiancée's full name clearly, and naturally doesn't want to remember it because the delicate, noble young lady would only hinder his conquest campaigns. But he probably doesn't realize now that someday in the future, he will kneel on the ground begging Lillian to marry him. Meanwhile, Lillian and her brother are having tea in the garden. She didn't expect the crude pendant she gave to Duke Ham and Lena would receive a gift in return. She carefully opens the gift box. Under the sunlight, the gemstone sparkles brilliantly. The maids exclaim in admiration, amazed at how beautiful this necklace is. Lillian picks up the greeting card attached beside it. The simple words contain an elder's blessing. At this moment, Alan beside her tells her this is one of the late Empress's most precious collections. Lillian almost drops the gift box in shock upon hearing his words. Moreover, if she appears at the social gathering wearing this necklace, it might cause much unnecessary troubles. Thinking that the secret of the family marriage might be exposed, Lillian feels very troubled. Cedric sees her worry. He tells her that the nobles appearing at this social gathering all share the same political stance as the estate of Turin, so she needn't worry. Moreover, Duke Ham and Lena has a deeper purpose, to warn everyone, not to disrespect the future Grand Duchess. Cedric feels gratified that she could gain Duke Ham and Lena's recognition. However, thinking that her first-hand braided pendant wasn't given to him, he silently takes a sip of tea to cover his inner jealousy. His words make Lillian obediently accept the gift, but her intuition makes her feel vaguely uneasy. Soon the day of the social gathering arrives. Lillian comes to find Marchioness Lannister carrying a large bouquet of bright flowers. She has already had servants deliver greeting gifts to the other ladies. Only this bouquet for Marchioness Lannister is personally brought by her. Marchioness Lannister shows a satisfied smile. She's looking forward to Lillian's performance today. As the venue doors slowly open, Lillian appears before everyone. Her elegant posture and luxurious attire make her the most dazzling focus of the social gathering. The necklace given by Duke Ham and Lena is worn at her chest. The young ladies in the room all rise simultaneously upon seeing the necklace, because they know it is a symbol of the future Grand Duchess. Therefore, what greets Lillian is full of flattery and praise, but she doesn't show arrogance because of this. Just then, a young lady asks Lillian if she could allow her to touch the necklace. Such a presumptuous request is obviously somewhat impolite, but Lillian still gently bends down to fulfill her wish. Her modest and appropriate attitude wins almost everyone's favor, except for Marianne in the corner, who shows an extremely upset expression. Originally, she was the center of attention at the social gathering, but now Lillian has stolen the spotlight that belonged to her. The more she looks, the more she finds Lillian hypocritical and annoying. She angrily questions Lillian that the necklace is the late Empress's relic. How dare she accept it? The atmosphere on the spot immediately becomes tense. However, the young noble ladies are more willing to side with the gentle and elegant Lillian. Ilaria protects Lillian behind her, explaining to Marianne that this necklace was given to Lillian by Duke Hamonlena. If Lillian refused to accept it, it wouldn't be disrespectful to him. To resolve the awkwardness, someone suggests having Lillian, who just joined the social gathering, perform tea ceremony for everyone. Lillian readily agrees. Before this, Marchioness Lannister had already helped her correct her wrong tea brewing method. Her flowing movements are pleasing to watch. She presents the brewed tea to the young ladies. After the initial bitterness comes an endless sweet aftertaste. They all praise this unique greeting gift, but Marianne refuses to let it go. She takes a small sip and deliberately makes vomiting sounds. Such childish behavior instead makes her the target of isolation. As a return gift for the tea, Ilaria invites Lillian to visit the garden. This is the first time Lillian has integrated into a social gathering so smoothly. She happily accepts. They affectionately link arms and leave, not inviting Marianne from the corner. Jealousy makes the ostracized Marianne lose her reason. She vents her anger on the room's furnishings. When the young ladies return to the room, the venue is already in complete disarray, which makes them very dissatisfied, but their criticism doesn't make Marianne restrain herself. Furious with shame, she raises her voice to accuse Lillian. Such behavior happens to irritate Lillian, who is already feeling unwell. She feels difficulty breathing. Her vision goes black, and she suddenly faints amid others' exclamations. Upon receiving news of her fainting, Cedric immediately rushes over without stopping. As soon as he enters the room, he sees the unconscious Lillian, whose face flushed with an unnatural redness, which makes him blame himself terribly. He worries that the leaked news of the engagement has put her in danger. After careful examination, the doctor tells him Lillian hasn't been poisoned, just very weak. His words make Cedric slightly relieved, but Lillian's continued unconsciousness still worries him greatly. Just then, the doctor thinks of an extremely rare condition. He hurriedly asks Cedric if he remembers Lillian's level of the mana at birth. Cedric is puzzled about his words. The doctor explains that mana and vitality can be converted. Lillian might be suffering from loss of mana. Now that her internal mana is insufficient, her limited vitality will automatically supplement the mana. If the condition continues to progress at this rate, she might not live past 20 years old. Moreover, loss of mana is incurable. It is equivalent to giving Lillian a death sentence. Cedric cannot suppress his inner grief. His sister is only 12 years old now. He asks the doctor to do everything possible to save Lillian. The doctor tells him it's not completely hopeless. Mana of the same attribute can be transferred to each other. That means Cedric can transfer his own mana to Lillian to help alleviate her condition. Cedric doesn't know how long he can extend Lillian's life, but he swears he will definitely find a way to cure loss of mana. Those who have harmed his sister, he will never forgive. After receiving Cedric's mana, Lillian has recovered most of her strength. From far away, she can feel Cedric's anger toward Marianne, but all she can do is explain to him that the situation had nothing to do with Marianne. Cedric comes before her, sighing that she's still too kind. He tells her that not raising an army is already his greatest mercy toward Marianne, and he instructs her to rest well. Due to her physical weakness requiring frequent bed rest, she spends the entire spring in such recuperation. On the other front, Damien, who is far away fighting in the northern part of the Empire, still doesn't know his little fiancée is ill. In fact, Damien also suffers from another mana-related condition. However, his condition is exactly opposite to Lillian's. He has congenital mana excess. Meanwhile, Lillian faints again. The days of recuperation are boring, but fortunately, the friends she met at the social gathering often come to visit her. From them, Lillian learns what happened after she fainted. Marianne paid the price for her unreasonable behavior. She was completely expelled from the social gathering and became a laughingstock among the nobles. Of course, Lillian doesn't know that Cedric also imposed political sanctions on the Blanchette family where Marianne belongs. 4 days after the incident, the Blanchette family finally sent a belated apology letter. The insincere content makes Cedric's face darken the moment he finishes reading. Along with the letter is a cheap necklace as an apology gift. Cedric mercifully doesn't kill the messenger but has him relay a message. That Tureen does not accept apologies. Duke Hamonlena also imposes sanctions on the Blanchette family. Marianne, who caused Lillian to faint, is the daughter of his late wife's brother. Compared to the well-behaved Lillian, Marianne is spoiled, making her quite detestable. Her father is even more utterly hopeless. Completely disappointed, Duke Hamonlena cuts off all aid to the Blanchette family. Lillian knows nothing about all of this. Her primary task now is to recover peacefully. The loss of mana makes her more drowsy. As soon as Cedric enters the room, he sees her obedient sleeping face. After learning she has been sleeping for more than 2 hours, he decides to wake her up to eat something and gently calls her name. However, Lillian is still immersed in her dreams. She unconsciously grabs his hand tightly, defensively nuzzling against his palm. This makes him even more reluctant to wake her up. He asks Madame Hayworth if Lillian can sleep a little longer, but Madame Hayworth firmly refuses. Lillian wakes up at this moment. She rubs her eyes drowsily. Since falling ill, she can feel that her brother has been constantly constantly worried. To keep them from worrying, she has been behaving very obediently, trying to ensure adequate sleep and healthy eating. Even though eating has become an extremely energy-consuming burden for her now, she still tries to make it. To help her eat more, Cedric specially brings her favorite fruit from the distant east. He tells her that peaches represent longevity in the mysterious Eastern culture. He hopes that after eating the peaches, she will live a long and healthy life. Lillian takes the peach that Cedric personally peels for her. Under their watchful eyes, she takes a small bite. The sweet and delicious taste makes her show an amazed expression. Cedric is also relieved that she finally has an appetite. A month later, when the peach blossoms are at their peak, Duke Lena plants an entire peach grove for Lillian. Coming to claim credit, he tells Lillian with pride in his voice that this is his wedding gift to her. This makes Cedric, standing behind Lillian, tremble with anger, because he has lost again in the matter of gift-giving. Lillian looks speechless at the two men secretly competing with each other. However, the current peace is only temporary. Lillian knows that the future will not be as smooth as it is now. Before long, Duke Lena will die from overwork. She truly hopes this old man who dotes on her can live a long and healthy life, but this is not an ending she can change. All she can do is spend as much time as possible by Duke Lena's side. In the same year, the Crown Prince loses his protection and is kidnapped. Her fiancé Damien will also be severely injured while rescuing the Crown Prince. He will become mentally unstable and losing an eye. Lillian is determined to prevent this series of events from happening. Time passes unknowingly. In the blink of an eye, Lillian is already 19 years old. Over these years, through the joint efforts of everyone in the estate of Turin, her physical condition has been gradually improving. However, it is also this year that Duke Lena passes away. Although she is very sad, she has done everything she can. She is already very content that she can accompany him through his final moments. Moreover, she has more important things to do next, because this year is also the most crucial year for the power struggle over the throne. In a week, the Crown Prince will be kidnapped in Canticune, a direct territory of the Empire. The purpose of this kidnapping is to kill the Crown Prince and frame Damien, so that the second Prince Claude, who has no inheritance rights, can legitimately inherit the throne. Although Claude's plan ultimately fails, Damien also loses an eye because of it. So Lillian decides to go to Canticune first. She must prevent this conspiracy no matter what. However, since falling ill, Cedric has been overprotective of her, so she must find a sufficient reason to convince him to allow her to leave the estate of Turin. At this moment, a perfect plan emerges in her mind. A few days later, Cedric predictably pushes open her door. As soon as he enters, he worriedly asks why her appetite has decreased recently. This is, of course, intentional on Lillian's part. She weakly leans against his shoulder, saying that she doesn't have a good appetite lately because of the cold weather, and expresses her desire to go somewhere warmer to escape the cold. She guiltily glances at his expression, although she feels sorry for making her brother worry. Only this way will he allow her to go to Canticune. She has already planned it out. There is a route between the estate of Turin and Canticune that takes only 2 hours to travel directly, so it won't affect her brother's regular mana transfers to her. Cedric naturally doesn't want her to leave his protection. He suggests building her a glass greenhouse. Lillian has anticipated that he would say this, so she pretends to be disappointed and says, "Brother, if you don't agree, then forget it." The sister-obsessed Cedric can't bear to see her suffer even the slightest grievance. Returning to his office, his mind is filled with images of Lillian suffering from poor appetite. After much consideration, he still agrees to her request to go to Canticune to escape the cold, but on the condition that she must follow his arrangements. Lillian readily agrees. Within the following days, she starts planning how to deal with the series of events next. Lillian looks distressfully at the luggage Cedric has prepared for her. She vaguely remembers someone measuring her size and having her choose gemstones while she was sound asleep. If these things had happened while Lillian was awake, she would definitely have refused because she is only leaving for 2 weeks. But the luggage filling half the room gives her the illusion of moving house. So many valuable things create quite a psychological burden for her. Among the luggage, Lillian discovers an exquisitely crafted wooden box, which obviously contains priceless treasures. She and Ellen's sister Rita carefully open it. Unexpectedly, it contains a uniquely designed pipe. Lillian wonders why her brother would give such a gift. After all, she doesn't smoke. Just then, the doctor responsible for examining her arrives. He explains to Lillian that this is not an ordinary pipe, but a medicinal one, which can vaporize herbs to help her inhale them better. Lillian doesn't expect Cedric to give her such an expensive item. Just as she is about to refuse, the doctor speaks first, telling her that Cedric has already registered this pipe under her name as a reward 2 hours ago. If she refuses, it can only be thrown away. Lillian can only reluctantly accept it, complaining that her brother is too cunning, learning to use this method to force her to accept the gift. In the blink of an eye, it's time for Lillian to go to Canticune. Cedric reluctantly holds her hand. The terrible weather makes him want to keep her for one more day. Lillian is equally reluctant to leave him, but she knows that if she departs tomorrow, she definitely won't be in time to save Damien. She tells him not to worry. The journey between the estate of Turin and Canticune takes only 2 hours. If Cedric misses her, he can visit anytime. Cedric doesn't continue to persuade her. He gently adjusts the cloak on her shoulders, then hugs her tightly. This is their first long separation. Before departure, Cedric instructs the accompanying guard to ensure Lillian's safety. After speaking, he thoughtfully lifts Lillian into the carriage, watching the carriage gradually disappear into the distance. Cedric inexplicably feels uneasy. The rain grows heavier, and they are about to reach Canticune. Lillian tiredly smokes her medicinal pipe. The long journey has put considerable strain on her body. She instructs the guards to take a detour to Terran 3rd Street, because this is where Damien was severely injured. She has cleverly bought tickets to a nearby theater in advance. Even if they are questioned at roadblocks, they have a reason to get through. Just then, the carriage experiences violent jolting, causing the unprepared Lillian to fall heavily. But she immediately steadies herself and instructs the accompanying maid to open the carriage door. She elegantly and gracefully steps down from the carriage. The guard is confronting a severely injured blonde man, and he is Lillian's fiancé, the third Prince Damien. But at this moment, his chaotic consciousness and the surging mana in his body are torturing him madly. He urgently needs an outlet to release his mana, and this guard who dares to obstruct him is undoubtedly the best choice. Damien has already assumed an attacking stance. In just a few seconds, this poor guard will be torn to pieces by him. At this time, a gentle voice rings out. In an instant, it soothes his restless heart. Damien looks bewilderedly at this woman stepping down from the carriage. They have obviously never met, but she has an inexplicable attraction that draws him close. Lillian carefully explains to Damien that she is Lillian from the estate of Turin. Just as she is still worried that Damien won't believe her, Damien suddenly sways and falls heavily to the ground. A guard nearby asks the young lady if they should call the knights. Lillian put a finger to her lips, signaling for silence. She tells the guard that this person is none other than the Grand Duke of the Empire, and orders him to place the unconscious Damien in the carriage. Noticing Damien's flushed face, Lillian guesses he might have a fever. She uses her hand to feel the temperature of his cheek. Damien unconsciously nuzzles against her soft palm without any defense. The sensation makes Lillian instantly freeze. Damien becomes more presumptuous and grips her hand tightly. Rita shows dissatisfaction with his behavior of being handsy even while injured. Lillian can only smile awkwardly, explaining that he probably feels her hand is warmer. She gently pulls her hand away. Damien happens to wake up at this moment. He grips her hand tightly, his eyes revealing confusion and helplessness. Lillian can't help but feel a trace of sympathy. Realizing that the mentally traumatized Damien can't recognize her at all now, she can only soften her voice and try to comfort him. Just then, the carriage suddenly stops. Through the window, Lillian sees the knights belonging to Claude. If they discover the wanted Damien in their carriage, the consequences would be unthinkable. In this emergency, Lillian forces herself to calm down, but there's no space to hide anyone in the narrow carriage. She looks at her wide skirt and comes up with a plan in her desperation. Then she gently lifts the carriage curtain and deliberately assumes an arrogant attitude, questioning whether the knights don't recognize the emblem of Turin. The captain explains that they are searching passing vehicles under imperial orders and hopes she can cooperate. Lillian hears the threat in his tone and coldly questions whether they have a search warrant. Her stalling gradually makes the captain lose patience. He reveals his identity and threatens Lillian that if she doesn't open the door, don't blame them for being rude. Lillian knows that continuing the standoff might arouse his suspicion, so she has no choice but to order the guard to open the carriage door. At this moment, the captain shows a triumphant smile. However, the scene before his eyes makes him blush and his heart race. The carriage is filled with smoke, and Lillian lazily reclines against the blankets. She glances at him with arrogant eyes, which makes him immediately look away shyly and apologize for being too rude. Lillian knows her plan has succeeded. To get rid of them quickly, she deliberately lets one side of her collar slip slightly, speaking in a soft voice about feeling cold. The captain is completely defeated by her series of attacks and hastily expresses his apologies before retreating. As the carriage door slams shut, Lillian's anxious heart gradually calms down. She quickly gets up, revealing Damien hidden under her skirt. Although her earlier behavior was impolite, for the safety of everyone present, she had no choice but to resort to this strategy. She quietly observes Damien's sleeping face, having to admire that he is extremely handsome. She becomes utterly engrossed in watching. However, Damien opens his eyes at this moment. Only then does the mesmerized Lillian come back to her senses. He props up his upper body and elegantly yawns. His light purple pupils are misty from just waking up. Lillian remembers the book mentioning his beauty, but she didn't expect him to be so good-looking in person. Realizing that staring at him continuously is rude, she quickly apologizes to Damien and politely explains that it's because his eyes are so pretty that she became mesmerized. Receiving the compliment, Damien smiles and asks if Lillian is telling the truth. Lillian only feels that his low and gentle voice is so alluring that she doesn't hear his question clearly. Seeing that she doesn't answer, he changes to a sitting position, leans toward her direction, and smilingly repeats his earlier question. Now Lillian hears clearly and tells him that every word she said is true. Suddenly, they hear a commotion outside. Obviously, the inspection at this checkpoint is clearly not as easy to fool as the last one. The accompanying guards have already started arguing with the knights. Lillian anxiously watches this scene. If her rescue of Damien is exposed, the consequences would be unthinkable. Damien seems to see her worry and whispers in her ear, telling her not to be nervous. This intimate contact makes Lillian turn around sharply. Damien grins and smugly tells her that no one here can defeat him. Lillian knows this, but she didn't expect his rampaging mana to calm down so quickly. However, killing these obstructing people would also mean a complete breakdown between the estate of Turin and the Second Prince's faction. Lillian is still hesitating, but unexpectedly, Damien has already opened the carriage door. The chaotic arguing instantly quiets because of his appearance. Gradually, the noisy sounds outside the carriage subside, because Damien has killed all the knights obstructing them. Even after killing so many people, not a single drop of blood stains his body. Seeing Lillian preparing to step down from the carriage, he quickly sheathes his sword. The sword hilt still bears the pendant that Lillian gave to Duke Hemenlina in her youth. He slowly walks toward her direction. The accompanying guard want to stop this dangerous man. Damien, however, kneels before Lillian, picking up the pipe that fell to the ground, his reverent manner like a knight guarding a princess. Lillian's heart skips a beat, but she quickly calms herself down, composedly taking the offered pipe. She is surprised that Damien has such a good condition. She silently celebrates in her heart that although this incident wasn't in her plans, at least Damien now has both eyes intact and his mental state is relatively normal. The direct territory filled with Claude spies is not safe to visit, so Lillian suggests that Damien should first return with her to the estate of Turin to lay low, so she can also discuss future strategies with her brother. Her words surprise Damien, but given the current situation, this is indeed his best option right now, so he accepts her proposal. The carriage turns around and heads in the opposite direction. Lillian still worries whether Damien will suspect her. After all, as someone from the estate of Turin, she appeared here for no reason and conveniently saved the severely injured him. All of this together seems too coincidental. Damien sincerely thanks her, while Lillian modestly says it was all just a small favor. Although her words are formal and distant, Damien is still very interested in her. He feels she seems to have many secrets he doesn't know about. Damien smiles and leans closer, asking Lillian to give him a chance to repay her. Lillian is puzzled. She initially wants to refuse, but suddenly she thinks of something that only he can do. She looks up to meet his gaze. His harmless smile reminds her of a venomous snake lying in wait for its prey. It must be said that her sixth sense is very accurate. At this moment, Damien earnestly expresses his desire to repay her. Not wanting to trouble others, Lillian hesitates. But for the safety of the people in the estate of Turin, she still asks him to help her destroy the tunnel connecting the estate of Turin and the direct territory. If they don't destroy it, the Empire's army can attack Turin's city walls in just 2 hours. This is an extremely dangerous existence for the estate of Turin. Her request somewhat surprises Damien. He asks Lillian why her brother doesn't destroy the tunnel himself. Lillian shakes her head, saying that Cedric cannot destroy it. Damien asks why she thinks he can do it. A trace of cunning flashes in Lillian's eyes. She doesn't give a direct answer, but nonchalantly says that if Damien feels he can't do it, he can refuse her. Her playful tone seems to carry a challenge. Her words not only don't displease Damien, but make him eager to try. His fiancée still knows too little about him. He thinks that if he agrees to her request, she will definitely be very happy. So he confidently stands up and tells Lillian he will try his best. A mere tunnel is child's play for him with his off-the-charts mana. He has already planned it out. Once he emerges from the tunnel, he will formally propose to Lillian. Before meeting Lillian, his life was shrouded in darkness. He was nearly brutally killed by his biological father right after birth. The birth of a prince should have been a cause for national celebration, but his birth was like a nightmare. The mana testing machine exploded in public. No one knew whether this infant, whose mana could rampage at any time, would bring destructive disaster to the Empire. The Supreme Emperor wanted to kill him to eliminate future troubles, but the child's peaceful sleeping face in the castle ultimately prevented him from being ruthless. Thus, Damien, who narrowly survived, grew up with difficulty in the palace. From the time he could remember, he was surrounded by fearful and disgusted gazes. As he grew older, his mana went out of control less frequently, but in everyone's eyes, he was still a monster who could rampage at any time. So at the mere age of 13, he was sent to the battlefield. Except for his eldest brother, no one cared about his life or death. Becoming the royal sword was his only destiny. And Damien, who had always lived in malice, also knew that only in bloody slaughter could he find the meaning of his existence. He single-handedly turned the tide of war. When he returned triumphantly, the people in the city welcomed him home with celebrations. These cheers and praises sounded ironic and absurd to him. A killing machine like him was actually hailed as a war hero by the people. His remarkable military achievements on the battlefield didn't free Damien from his previous inhumane life. He still needed to be restrained by specially made clothing and imprisoned in a cramped room. Fortunately, his oldest brother would often come to keep him company. He told Damien that there was a disease in this world that would cause people's mana to become depleted. If Damien could meet someone with this disease, they could both alleviate each other's suffering. At that time, he never dared to hope that such a miracle would befall him. But when Lillian appeared before him, he felt his entire world was illuminated. It turned out that heaven still favored him. Damien admits that his initial love at first sight for Lillian was due to instinctual attraction. However, in their subsequent interactions, the gentle and intelligent her gradually occupied his heart, bit by bit. He roughly guesses that his fiancée's request to destroy the tunnel is for the purpose of protecting the estate of Turin. But if he successfully completes the task, perhaps she will agree to his proposal on the spot. Thinking of this, Damien only feels the blood in his entire body boiling. He confidently swings the sword in his hand. On the other side, Lillian waits outside the tunnel for Damien's triumphant return. Just then, an anxious shout interrupts her thoughts. But before she can see who it is, a pair of strong arms tightly embrace her. Cedric's barely perceptible trembling also carries the joy of recovery after loss. Lillian only feels her nose tingle. In her memory, her usually composed brother has never shown such a loss of composure. She quietly apologizes to him. Suddenly, a deafening roar sounds at this moment. In an instant, the ground begins to shake uncontrollably, and the horses are also startled. Overwhelming flames burst from the depths of the tunnel, and a powerful magical force rushes toward them. Cedric feels intense shock and unease. He instinctively shields Lillian behind him. The thick smoke gradually disperses. A figure emerges from the smoke. Damien approaches them with steady steps. His tremendous destructive power makes Cedric shocked. Against such terrifying power, he has no chance of winning, but even if it costs him his life, he will protect his sister. He shields Lillian behind him, assuming a defensive posture. Lillian stops him in time. She tells him that the person approaching is Damien, the Grand Duke of the Empire. Under the horrified gaze of the knights, Damien comes before Lillian. He then kneels humbly, gently smoothing the wrinkles on her skirt with tender movements. He lovingly lifts a corner of her garment and reverently places a kiss upon it. He gazes at her with burning eyes, smiling as he asks if she would marry him. Lillian feels at a loss, because this is completely different from the plot in the novel she remembers. In the book, Damien never loved his wife. She can't help thinking that he might be pretending to be innocent. It must be said that her guess is completely correct. Then Damien asks in a gentle tone if Lillian would let him hold her hand once more. Although such a presumptuous request is improper, he still cannot control his wildly beating heart. If possible, he would even want to become Lillian's pet cat, unscrupulously enjoying her gentle teasing and caresses. However, he doesn't notice that her complexion is getting worse and worse. The long journey has placed an extremely heavy burden on her fragile body. Amid their exclamations, Lillian staggers and falls toward Damien's direction. But before he can catch her, Cedric quickly pulls Lillian back into his arms. The weak Lillian quietly nestles in Cedric's embrace. Cedric hurriedly lifts Lillian in his arms, carefully settling her into the carriage returning to Turin. Until the carriage gradually disappears, Damien still stands frozen in place. Realizing that Lillian has actually been taken away from his hands, Damien shows a displeased expression. But thinking that Lillian has been engaged to him since she was 12 years old, he becomes cheerful again. On the other side, returning to the estate, Cedric immediately calls for a doctor to treat Lillian. After a careful examination, the doctor helplessly says that she has a poor physical condition and needs him to use his mana to supplement her insufficient mana. Cedric immediately steps forward to grasp her hand, transferring mana into Lillian as before. However, the connection for mana seems to be severed this time. The despair of possibly losing his sister at any moment makes Cedric tremble all over. He anxiously asks the doctor what's happening. Fortunately, the doctor has some understanding of this situation. He tells Cedric that Lillian may have encountered someone whose magical attributes are more suitable for her, so she no longer needs his mana. When Lillian awakens from unconsciousness, unexpectedly, the person sitting by her bedside is her fiancé Damien. But she clearly remembers that the last person to carry her to the carriage was her brother. Lillian struggles to prop herself up. Her loose collar also gradually slips with her movement. This scene is witnessed simultaneously by Damien and Cedric. Cedric shows a panicked expression. Rita immediately understands his meaning. She quickly steps forward to tie up Lillian's loose clothing, and thoughtfully draws the bed curtains. Damien blushes and looks away. He curiously asks Cedric if Lillian's physical condition isn't very good. Cedric becomes furious at his question. If it weren't for his rash proposal, his sister wouldn't have fainted. Moreover, his sister, whom he has cherished like a treasure, has been matched with more suitable mana just by holding hands with him. Thinking of this, Cedric feels both heartbroken and lost. His attitude toward Damien becomes even more hostile. The atmosphere suddenly becomes tense. Damien is the first to lower his stance. After all, Cedric is Lillian's brother, and Lillian will eventually become his legitimate wife. Perhaps his temporary submission isn't a loss. Maybe the kind Lillian will pity him after seeing him being bullied by Cedric. Cedric gets chills from the smile in his eyes. Then he hears Damien sweetly call him brother just like Lillian does. He is immediately shocked into rigidity, and his already dark expression becomes more gloomy. However, seeing this, Damien not only doesn't restrain himself, but smiles more brilliantly. Even Lillian behind the curtains can feel the strange atmosphere outside. Fortunately, the doctor nearby stops their meaningless argument in time. He tells Cedric that Damien's mana is more suitable for Lillian than his, so they need to trouble Damien to treat her. After hearing the doctor's explanation, Damien is overjoyed. They are indeed a destined pair. After learning that only his mana can cure Lillian, his face has been wearing a smug smile. Cedric is so angry, and his face turns dark at his showing-off appearance. But he walks unperturbedly to Lillian's bedside, reverently kneeling, and gently asking Lillian to give him her hand. However, Lillian doesn't respond for a long time. The atmosphere in the room room instantly falls into strange silence. Damien can't help but reflect on himself. Was his previous rash proposal too presumptuous and burdensome for her? Or is it because his appearance is too pretty? A terrible thought suddenly surfaces in his mind. His fiancée doesn't like men who are more pretty than her. In just a few seconds, he has already imagined countless reasons for being disliked. However, at this moment, an apology comes from behind the curtains. Damien is stunned, but Lillian lying on the bed already shows a sad expression. In her memory, her husband never truly cared about her, not even bothering to express disgust. So from the day she learned the plot, Lillian had already decided not to cause Damien any trouble. However, given the current situation, she can only accept his help. She obediently extends her hand. Getting permission, Damien quickly grasps her hand. In just an instant, he feels his heart beating uncontrollably. He gently rubs her hand, tenderly placing a kiss on the back of her hand. Their intertwined fingers are like a passionate embrace between lovers. Cedric only feels anger surging upon seeing this. He glares viciously at Damien before him. If it weren't for the fact that Lillian can only accept his mana, he would never allow this lecher to touch Lillian. Damien also realizes his impropriety. He quickly coughs to cover his inner embarrassment. Blue mana swirls around their clasped hands. This is the first time he has so gently transferred his mana to another person. The process of transferring mana requires great patience. However, Damien hopes the mana can flow more slowly, so he can hold her hand a little longer. But Lillian doesn't know his thoughts. Thinking she's taking up too much of his time, she tactfully tries to interrupt this lengthy treatment. But before she can finish speaking, Damien reluctantly shakes his head. His low, husky voice carries a different kind of tenderness as he asks Lillian not to take away this time that belongs exclusively to them. Lillian wants to say something more, but feels her eyelids getting heavier and heavier. Soon she falls asleep. Only at this moment does Damien reluctantly withdraw his hand. He carefully tucks Lillian in, and just as he's about to leave, his peripheral vision catches Cedric behind him with a livid expression. Damien can't help but respond with a provocative smile, which makes Cedric even more displeased. Lillian's inability to accept his mana is already something that saddens him, yet now he has to thank this man who stole his sister away. He trembles with rage, but for Lillian's sake, he has to maintain surface courtesy toward this detestable man. He thanks Damien through gritted teeth, while Damien responds with a brilliant smile, saying it's his honor. Looking at this smug face before him, Cedric wishes he could punch it. However, the doctor interrupts their conversation at this moment, joyfully telling Cedric that Lillian's mana transfer this time is better than ever before. Lord Cedric, His Highness and Lady Lillian are truly a match made in mana. If possible, perhaps you can consider having them marry as soon as possible. His words are like adding fuel to the fire. Cedric's gaze toward Damien becomes more terrifyingly dark. He decides that no matter what, he cannot let this menace stay by his sister's side. To avoid disturbing Lillian's rest, they move their battlefield to Cedric's office. However, not long after they leave, Lillian wakes up and has recovered most of her strength after treatment. But because Damien transferred too much mana to her, she still feels a bit drowsy. However, it is not the time for her to rest now. She doesn't want to become the miserable villainess from the novel, so she decides to personally thank Damien and discuss their marriage while she's at it.